when he's here, he's speaking from the word, and when he's here, um, he's having his opinion. Well, I'm doing something similar to that, but with my own wrinkle to it, because I want to talk about something that is really like near and dear to my heart. Um, but I don't want to talk about it. I want to have a conversation about it, really. Um, so I would like for you to consider me sitting down in this chair, really your invitation to um, join into a discussion and a dialogue about our topic tonight. So if you would, yeah. I don't know how this works for cameras or anything like this.
Nobody has any cooties, right?
If you do have cootie, it looks like you have a lot of Purell on your bag, so you should be all right.
Oh, there we are, yes, yes.
Yeah.
If you need any, I have it here.
All right. Thank you. Um, so I actually needed to be talked into this topic. Well, I didn't need to be talked into this topic. Um, I had been discussing this thing that's on my heart for a while with Mark, um, and it it's obviously a topic that's been driven out of like current events and what's how our nation looks right now, and a lot of divide that we have. Um, and I had to call Mark because I was like, I have Bible study, but I have this thing on my heart, and I don't think I'm ready to talk about it from a teaching standpoint. Like, really, me sitting down and getting to this level is telling you that I don't have all the answers for this. Okay? I do not have all the answers, and we will not get to all the answers in an hour and a half or how much time we have. Um, but this is really my heart's desire to have a conversation with you about what diversity looks like and what our heart is for that. Um, the one thing in discussing it, I think I have some questions, and there are mics here, and this will go a lot smoother if you completely engage. But if you engage, I want you to engage from the standpoint of I want you to contribute from a standpoint that I've really thought through what I'm saying. Okay, not this is my burning feeling right now, and I just need to like regurgitate it out because I heard it on you know some kind of media blog or Facebook or something like that. Um, I would ask that you really that in any response or in any conversation we have, it's really about what you've carefully considered. And maybe the greatest revelation that you could have coming out of tonight, is that have I carefully considered this? Have I sat down and thought about this topic to the point where I can sit down and have a real intellectual discussion about what this looks like when it comes to the kingdom? Okay? So I want to talk about diversity because it's really near and dear to my heart. Um, and it's something that I've been considering a lot when you look at, like I said, just our social landscape right now. So my first question to you that I really need your help on is, to you, what does diversity look like? What does it look like to you? What does it mean? We'll put one mic on this side. And you want to know something? I'm going to treat this almost like a SOS, and I'm sorry if you're on camera, you're not here. But if there are some pauses for you to think, I'm not going to feel uncomfortable with that tonight. I'm really not going to feel uncomfortable with that. But I would like to know, like, what does it mean to you? What do you think about when you think about that word or you hear that word? You want-
Different mindsets. Even in materials there's diversity, and it's like, for instance, Teflon was not created, it was a mistake, but it became, what it is through people saying yes, it's useful, and that became a diverse material. Oh Lord. You talking about people, or you just talking
I'm a,
different mindsets? That's what I got to say. Different mindsets, different upbringing, different nationalities.
different.
I think of room for all, that there is no exclusion.
Where there is no exclusion. Okay.
And expansion, like when you diversify, you go outside your normal capacity.
Okay. Any other ideas on it? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like we think of diversity as like groups, but to me, that's actually the opposite. Like we're grouping them into fewer groups than there should be. Like to me, diversity is everyone. Like you said, make room for everyone, but it's everyone is entirely unique. And so there aren't even really groups, so
Yeah.
to speak, because you could have two people of different, their skin color could be different, but they could be so alike in a million other ways. But if you wanted to group them by skin color, like, I don't know, like that, whatever thing you pick, but like everyone is so entirely unique that diversity is just everyone.
I think that's interesting because the first thing that may pop up in your mind is what you said. Like, I think diversity, and I start thinking of these like, okay, here's this category, and here's this category, and here's this category. All right, and now we're diverse.
Yeah, it's like
because,
the complete opposite of
yeah.
diverse.
Oh, we have some of these, and we have this demographic, and we have this demographic. Yes, we're diverse. Okay, so that's a really interesting point.
Well, I mean, it's what she said, but, the thing that comes to mind is, when I think about diversity, you just don't look like one another. When you have a group of diverse people, you don't look like one another. But you are like one another, in a lot of ways, like what you were talking about. So.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I will say that when we were talking about one spirit the other Sunday, I'm trying to think who it was here speaking that one Sunday. Randall, yes. I look at the news differently because every time you see what you see when you turn on the news, I keep thinking one spirit. And even though it seems like that in our minds that these people are doing terrible things, one spirit just keeps coming to my mind, and it makes me stop and think. And that's really it's tough to watch these things, and I usually avoid the news because of it. But now when I see these people, I just think one spirit, and I look at things differently.
Just thinking, when I think of diversity, I think of college, to be honest, because there's quotas to fit. Like, to say you're a diverse campus, you have to have so many subcultures, per se, like so many students from Korea, so many students from the Ukraine, so many students from the African American community, and that's what they believe makes their community diverse, so that they can have discussions within the college to have different viewpoints. So not necessarily what I think myself, but I think that's kind of a more worldview of diversity.
Yeah, and I I think that's really interesting because coming from like a minority standpoint, it's almost like, okay, now we're forcing this thing to happen, which we could have a discussion all day long. That's a whole different like political thing that we're not going to have here, all right? But we can have that discussion. But what happens at a college campus so many times, and what I see is what Leslie talked about, is we have this desire for diversity, and it almost drives us into these, like, we talk about cliques. Like we talk, you know, we see these kind of clique things happening. Do you know what the most segregated day of the week is in the United States? Sunday. Sunday is the most segregated day that we have. Why? Okay, say that. Go ahead.
Because all churches are predominantly something.
Okay, but why? Like, this is the part of this, I think this is the part of the discussion that we need to start diving into and get off the, like, the surface layer of these things. Why is it that on the day that we say that we're looking to, like, encounter the Father, which on the day that we're encountering the Father, we go into our separate corners, and now what you said about diversity of mindset, we go into these things, yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, that we're only the most comfortable. We're the most comfortable with people who are like us. I mean, so we, you know, on Sunday we're feeling like let's just go be with the like-minded believers rather than looking at the big picture of trying to, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Articulate. I like that.
There's something that that resonates with me, that, yeah.
Yeah, and like going off of that, being the most comfortable with people that are like you on the day that we're here encountering the Father, that's when we're the most vulnerable, I feel like. And so it's easier to be vulnerable with the Father and yourself with people that you're comfortable with because you know that they're like you.
Okay.
But I also think there's a cultural aspect to religion because most religions, sorry, be with the Father.
You may have stumbled on something.
Yeah,
there,
but I think that's how most people come to the Father is through their individual communities. And so that's kind of where people stay. They don't reach outside of that or explore outside of that. It's comfortable.
Yeah. I don't want to discount that it's a comfortable environment and you want to come and be with like-minded people. But I guess my question is, does the kingdom look like that? What does the kingdom look like? Does the kingdom look like a place where you go to where you're comfortable to experience the Father?
What do you mean by kingdom? Like, are you talking about heaven, or are you talking about like kingdom? When you say kingdom?
I don't know. I don't know if I ever separate these things. I feel like the kingdom of heaven is what earth should look like. Like, that's what I believe that the Father is driving to, or that's why Jesus was here. So I don't know if I really separated it out that way. Will you?
This is an idea. I think like the kingdom, it's like what God created and it's God's way, but all of us in our separate little groups in our different religions and churches or different denominations, we all have a different idea of what the kingdom is and different like ways to get into it or to be a part of it. And so like that's kind of where separation comes from because we all think that we're right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, I really, really like what you just said.
We all think we're right, yeah.
What'd she say?
She said, if I can have liberty to paraphrase what I heard?
Please do.
And you can correct me if I, going even off of what you said before about feeling comfortable to experience the Father, but we also like getting into our groups because we feel like we are right. Okay, and that's a very interesting concept because feeling like you're right justifies, for a lot of people, their Christianity. Like, this idea that there's us, and that there's them, and we're here, and that they're there, and we're right, and they're wrong, and because we're right, they're going to hell. Like, and it's a very divisive mindset to have with people that you're trying to draw in and bring closer. I don't know of anyone who's been successful at bringing unity by highlighting division. Injustice, yes. Like Jesus highlighted, like he showed injustice, but I don't think he highlighted division. What are you going to say?
Abraham Lincoln didn't he? He saw division in the House. He made a statement about.
Well, he saw it, right?
Not like Jesus did, but there was still. But he was also, he firmly believed in Jesus Christ, so I think he spun off of that. We'll read the definition of
Sure.
diversify. The state of having people who are different races or who have different cultures in group or organization.
You said that's the definition of diversify, right?
Diversity.
Diversity. Yeah, and I think the very surface level of diversity is this idea that we have people of different races and different cultures and different ethnicities. And I think those things are important. I truly think those things are important. So I am a Puerto Rican. I was born in New York, raised in New York, and a lot of my perspective comes from a lot of my upbringing. Some of them, now a lot more of my perspective actually, has come from me studying who I am, my identity, knowing who the Father is, all that type of stuff. But there are so many people who have, like, my same experience. If I were to sit here and say that I had a full understanding of who the Father is without taking time to listen to your experience and your perspective and some about your culture, and I don't know if I could say those two things. I don't know if I could say, oh, I know the Father, but I haven't sat down and listened to what your perspective of the Father is and who he is to you. Does that make sense at all? Does that make sense? Like, the cool thing about living where we lived and growing up where we grew up is you had access to so many different cultures. So I wonder if we're able to experience the Father in going into a different culture that is completely different and uncomfortable for you. Could we hear the Father there? And I wonder if by segregating ourselves so much like we do on Sunday, that when we go into a different environment, we almost become closed off to what the Father is saying. Are you hearing me at all? Is this making any sense? Or this has been on my heart for a while, so if it's just something that's coming out of my heart and it's not, if you're not hearing that, I want you to let me know.
What did you say in the first part of that?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. What did you say in the first part of that? Do you remember what you said?
Well, I'm talking a little bit about my perspective. There were a lot of things about my upbringing and how
No,
I
I
was
got
raised
that.
and
It was the
culturally.
part after that you talked about.
That I don't think that I can truly get a full perspective of the Father if I negate your perspective of the Father.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are you specifically talking in the Christian perspective?
What do you mean by that?
Well, because different cultures obviously have their own idea of how to see the Father.
Whew. That's very loaded. That's probably at the end of what we want to
Sorry.
talk about. Let's bring it all the way up. Let's bring it up right here, okay? We have a westernized view of who the Father is. And if you go to any other country, I don't know, pick a country, and you'll go to Israel, all right? Because we talk about how how the Jews viewed things, how the Greeks viewed things, they would have a very, very different perspective of who the Father is, how the Father operated, how, I mean, their view of the Scriptures would be completely different than ours, okay? So I don't think we could narrow it down to say, oh, here is our Western Christian worldview as being the right worldview or the correct worldview. I think some of our worldview is a little bit tilted towards what American culture would be and what our experience is. Does that make any sense? So you go to Africa. You go to Africa and go to a worship service in Africa, okay? And you will get an experience of people with such joy. Like, it's crazy. You experienced that in Haiti, right? You'll go deaf. I'm telling you, the chorus of singing and just the dancing and all this stuff, but you would look at their circumstance and you wouldn't equate those two things as being equal. So here, I think in the United States, you would equate someone's joy with circumstance, and when the circumstance matches the circumstance that makes me comfortable or happy, then you see joy. But you go to another country, and that does not, those two things don't intersect for them. So I think there's areas of worldview or that maybe we miss, like joy or peace. These things that we don't necessarily get because, it's very driven by circumstance. Does that answer? Well, what else is on your mind?
I know what you're saying. I think she's asking, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if it's where you want to go right now, but the context of Christianity of people believing Jesus is God. Is that where you're going?
Oh.
Yes.
Oh,
I would say
you're
yes,
talking
that is
about-
our context. Wouldn't
Okay.
you agree? Or
Maybe that's a caveat that I should have put it in the way in the beginning. I cannot ever move away from what Jesus said about him being the way, the truth, and the life. Like, that's one thing in the scriptures that I'm not gonna say, well, he was saying this. I think Jesus is saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I do, however, think that there are people experiencing the Father right now who don't know that it's him. That don't know that it's him. Harold Eberly would tell us that right now, because Jesus is visiting Muslims in dreams because there are not people coming up and speaking to them about Jesus. So Jesus is coming into their dream and saying, I am the person that you've been seeking. Religion is such a very interesting thing because I think innately in every person there is a drive towards the Father. I think people want to experience who God is. I think there are people who want to know who their Father is. I think there are people who are like just so hungry for that relationship with a loving God that if they experience it in whatever religion that is within that's surrounding them, they will. But once they encounter like Jesus, they'll recognize, oh, this is the one I was looking for the whole time. That's my view. That's what I think. Did anybody want to add to that or have thought on that?
Thank you. I have a dream, and I'm not trying to be facetious there with that, but that our church services would have what Acts 2 had with the amazed, the perplexed, and the mocking. I'm looking for a day that we are so open and our judgments have fallen down on our hearts so far that we can have people in here that totally disagree with us because something intrigues them.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible to have them all. In fact, I think that should be our goal as the church, is that even if they might not be where we are in their belief, they might call him Allah, they might call him nothing. They might call him I don't believe at all. But the fact that there's so much love here, that there's so much of something that they've been hungering for their whole lives, that they hang around with you, or they hang around with me, or they hang around with someone here. And, you know, if there's one thing I think everybody's hungry for is love. So no matter what name they call upon, no matter if they call upon none or something, I think the beginning of true diversity is giving people what they're all hungry for. And so my desire would be that they all be here. And I don't mean in a building. I really want to get the here different than the context of a building on Wayne Avenue or at some other place. I mean among us. Like truly in our lives and a part of us. Like that's our family. Like
Here
yeah.
is the place that we're talking
Like
about.
literally in our homes. Like having a Muslim family over to my house to eat dinner was an incredible moment. Being in their home, exchanging songs together. That was the most fun I think I've had in a long time. Laughing hysterically at one another. Truly sharing love. And so I didn't feel like I was compromising my faith at all to be with them. In fact, I felt like I was fulfilling my faith in being with them. And when I heard Leslie, I think Leslie gave the definition that Webster's ought to use. Simply no groups. I think the definition of diversity is no groups. And I think if the church can get out of its head that the we God talks about or the we that we talk about as the church, and we start talking about we as all of humanity, then we might be on the right track to true diversity.
Yeah.
Until our tribe is all of humanity, we're not there yet.
Yeah, until I can actually open my heart to say that all of humanity is allowed in here. You know, people will respond to acceptance. Like, people will respond to the ticket, the admission price is acceptance. What we want to do is, I think as Christians, what we want to do is condemn and ask questions later. Like shoot first, ask questions later. But we condemn and then ask questions later. And what we should be doing is asking questions. I think the one thing that separates us is, I know. I know. I know that this is this. I know that. And I know that there's things that we know just from the scriptures. I know that there's things that are absolute and rock solid foundation. But what you don't know is that person. So, yeah. So what would it be compromising to any faith, belief, or anything to say, I don't understand that. Could you tell me about it? Why is that so scary to us as Christians to sit down and say, you know what? You're Hindu. I don't know what that is. Could you tell me about it? Right. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Hi, Jen. That would be easy for me to remember. Here, I want to get. Sorry.
I think the moment we're saying, I know anybody else's thoughts but our own, we're no longer holding that person in a position of honor that God wants us to hold them in. Because we really don't know what somebody else's heart is at that moment. We need to say, I want to.
I think that's so good. Yeah, thanks for that. Can I just say, I love that, because even if I were to say to my wife, like, I know you, I am dishonoring what her experience is right now. Right? And I'm just taking for granted that I know her. And I don't even think the Father does that with us. I think the Father seeks us out constantly and wants to come and know us. And what, Mark said, what are you doing here? I think he constantly asks us that question. Like, why are you in this place? Like, tell me. I want to understand. Yeah.
Part of the reason I asked the question is because one of my best friends is Jewish. And I've been to synagogue with her, and I wanted her to come to my baptism, but I didn't really know how to do that. Like, I didn't know what that would look like or how she would feel coming there. And how, I guess, another question is, how far do we dive in? Do I go to synagogue with my friend? Do I go to temple? Do I do these things? not to worship the way they're worshiping, but to love my sister.
I kind of want your perspective on that, because I could tell you what I think about that, but what's your perspective on that?
I would go. I mean, why not? I mean, if your heart's open, I mean, why not go with her? Why not love her where she's at and go with her and experience it with her? I would go.
Are you Jewish? Nope. Does it matter? Remember, there's a part in the Bible where Paul says, if to be a Gentile, I'll be a Gentile. If I got to be a Jew, I'll be a Jew. It means
I'm a Jew.
I'll do whatever it takes to go deeper with that person. You know what I mean? It's like if someone got shot in the arm and you didn't love them at the time, but you walked over to them and they started talking to you and telling you about their lives, and you would go deeper with that person because they got shot. That's good enough for me. You know what I mean? I mean, nobody's going to judge you for walking in a Jewish church. Anybody in here? Nope. Not going to happen, sister. I mean, if you feel like that's what your heart is, to connect with her, roll with it.
I more, let's get the mic to Mark. Go ahead. But I think where I'm a little sad is that you worried about how she would be received in at your baptism.
Not how she would be received, how comfortable she would
Yeah.
be herself.
But I think what breaks down somebody's uncomfortable feeling is just this amazing feeling of love when they get into that place. So, I mean, what better way to break down a divide than to love inside that divide? Like, to actually go into that, gap place and say, oh, I think you're going to feel uncomfortable. Come with me because you're with me, because you love me. And then they experience the love of an entire family. I think that is better evangelism than you standing on a box and handing out tracts. I think that is a way of experiencing who Jesus is better than just here, let me open a scripture and show you, let me read it. Let me be this. Let me be love for you. Yep.
Yeah, you said most of what I was going to say.
That makes me feel good.
And I heard a definition one time of hospitality. And that's a beautiful word. And it's actually one of the beautiful gifts of the Spirit is actual hospitality. But even in hospitality, there's separateness. Just think about it. In hospitality, you're welcoming what?
A guest.
Guests. Why is someone a guest?
Because they're not always there.
Because what?
You don't know.
Yeah, they're not. My home's not their home.
Right.
And I mean, the person that shared that when I heard it was like, okay, we're kind of overemphasizing the whole point here. But at the same time, I was like, that's really true. It's amazing how many, I'm getting back to your thing, don't worry. But it's amazing how many of the words we use and the concepts that we think are so welcoming and so open actually are tinged with separate and tinged with bias. And so when I think about your friend and I think about you, I agree with Ben. You're the church to her. You're Christianity to her. And the greatest form of hospitality, that's why I said what I said about hospitality, because it's one thing for you to go to their home, but there's something about welcoming them into yours.
Yeah.
It's about, yeah, I'll go to your place, I'll go to your, well, why am I never invited to yours? And so, and I love your heart about, will she feel comfortable? And that's her choice.
Yeah.
Her comfortableness is her choice. That's not ours. Ours, I told someone this today, and I said, if everybody can remember this one thing, then everybody is effective in the earth. Wherever you are, open your heart. If there's one thing every human being can do, Christian, non-Christian, whatever, just open your heart to whoever's in front of you. It's the greatest ministry. It's the greatest gift. It's the greatest spiritual whatever that we can give someone else. Because everything that is of him in us will flow freely into them. And so to open your heart to her would be to open her to everything you are.
I love, I'm sorry. I love what you're saying because you're not making a prerequisite of opening your heart being that you're comfortable. Like you're not saying everywhere you're comfortable, open your heart. I don't think that that's what Jesus did. I think what Jesus gave you was the ability to open your heart in any environment that you're in. Because in any environment that you're in, with an open heart, you can affect it. Like you can be a catalyst. You can be so many things with an open heart. But what do we do so many times is I feel uncomfortable in this situation. So what's our default position? It's to close our heart. So now the thing that you are uncomfortable with becomes very true because your heart is now closed, and closed is actually a really uncomfortable position. Try to stay closed in your actual physical body for a long time, and you will become very uncomfortable. But stay open, and you'll find that you'll be able to naturally stay open longer than you could ever stay closed. Just as a physical manifestation of what happens in our heart.
Here's a doorstop, just in case you have trouble keeping your heart open.
Fear.
I think fear is a big one.
And I think that's part of what causes the divide, to be honest. Fear.
Fear of
what's
what?
on the other side of that color.
Fear of the unknown.
Or culture.
Okay. I'm glad you said fear and I'm glad you were very specific, because you said fear of what's on the other side of that color or culture.
Yeah.
Right? How do we get over that fear?
Learn their culture.
Engage.
Yeah.
There's only one way that we get over these things, and that is to actually engage. Disengaging actually creates more fear, and actually creates fear in that person too. Have you ever started to disengage with someone who, I mean, they're just staying there, they're just there, and you have a fear of them, or you're worried, and it almost creates that actual reality. Your closed heart, your fear actually drives them to close their heart to you, and now they're actually a little more scary for no reason. And it was actually our heart the whole time that was the issue. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah. We have a family that we're friends with, and they are Muslim. And the first time we went over to their dinner, or to their house for dinner, it was during something. I don't remember what religious time for them it was, but one of the most beautiful signs of hospitality I've ever seen was at their dinner, instead of them doing their traditional blessing out of respect for us, and there was another Christian family, they're like, would you guys like to please bless our food for us and do it the way you would do it so we can see it, and then we'll bless the way we do so you can see how we do things.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was over something very important in their religion, but they wanted to make sure that we were comfortable in their home. So.
I think we all have examples of people who are very different than us. Okay, so just recently we started renting out our first house to a family, and they're Buddhist. No, they're Hindu. They're Hindu. We could have easily made our relationship landlord and tenant. Okay, easily. But every time I walked into that house to pick up the rent check, this woman would cook a meal of Indian food that you could smell it outside. And I love Indian food. So you could smell the aroma and the spices. You could smell all these things. And she knew when we would come, or she knew when we would be there. We always get it on the 25th of the month. We're there, and she's always cooking at that time when we arrive. And she opened up her home, her hospitality, her heart to us, and she would give us the rent check, and she would give us food. I don't know which one I valued more. I think I valued the food more. Right? I think I valued the food more. To the point where it became exactly what Mark is saying. Like Jen was like, we have not had these people to our house. So Jen starts to really get to talking to her and learning about her to the point where we had her over our house and we invited people over. And could you imagine when you have someone who's so different that you bring into your environment and say, I want you to meet my friends. Like, I want you to meet the people who are closest to me. What does that do to any position of segregation in someone's heart? It takes it down, but it takes it down naturally, and it takes it down without argument. I don't remember one time an amazing argument of mine broke down someone's wall, ever. And I feel like I know the scriptures pretty well, and I feel like I have a good, solid foundation of what I believe, and I feel like, but like 0 times has my amazing intellectual argument broken down the wall. But these instances break down walls where you're actually being loved. All right.
Can I say
yeah,
something real quick?
Yeah.
That's me. So I didn't know if the moment passed or if it was even relevant, but I decided just to, come back to it anyway. But even to your original question about like, should I go to synagogue or, like, I think so much, if we can agree that so much of what we do is more about our motivation, our heart position, than what we actually do. So really, you could do the same thing. You could do it with one heart perspective, and you could do it with a different heart perspective, and it could actually change. Okay, I'm being so confusing. So yes, yeah. So meaning it's so like, I feel like there's so many questions you could ask, even crazy, outrageous things, and the answer could be, yeah, you could do that. If your heart is because you want closer relationship with them, or you want to draw them in closer to the Father. So I think it becomes less about what we do and more so about where our heart is. And so funny, Fani, Brandon, yes, said something to me like totally revolutionary years and years ago, and it was out of the context of diversity or race or anything that we're talking about, and it was more of like a relational issue that I was having. And she said something to me that seems like so simple, but it was so profound, and I'll never ever forget it. And she said, if you don't like somebody, it's because you don't know them. And I know that seems like, but think about that. Like, and when I literally thought about different people that I was like, well, I just don't click with them, or I can't, like, I asked myself, do you know them? And the answer was always no, like, you don't know them. And so I just think there's an opportunity there, especially, Ben was saying, like, asking questions, really get to know, because there's so many times that we just get put off by the initial, whatever it is, fear, and fear stops us. But if we literally just say, okay, I think I want to know this person or this whatever, then there's something that changes in that heart position of desiring to know. So I don't know, that was all over the place, but.
Yeah, I think more and more in my life, I've decided that asking questions, Jen and I have been practicing this for a long time, for a while now, in that our interactions need to have a lot more questions than they need to have statements. Because a lot of our statements are surrounded with this heart that I am right, and here's my statement of belief, instead of, well, what we said earlier, please, I want to understand, I want to know. I want to know. And I feel like I don't know is such a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful statement of where you are and what you desire from someone, that of truth, of understanding, of inclusion. You hear what I'm saying? Anybody else have?
Can I just say something about asking questions?
Sure.
Oftentimes, like, I ask questions very innocently. People are offended when I ask a question sometimes because I don't grasp the entire picture maybe of their culture. And so my heart is totally to want to know and understand, but their first response is offense.
Is that a question? How to fix that?
Yes. That was a statement with a really
with a
high
question
ending and a
mark.
question mark at the end.
Yeah, Reed, go ahead.
So at my last job, two of my coworkers were Mormon, and like I understood very little about Mormons and how their religious beliefs all work together, and I was scared to ask the questions of like, so you guys drink coffee or like what's that about? Like that kind of thing. So I stayed away from those questions. But what happened was I developed really close relationships with them. Like we became close. Like they're my friends, they're my buddies. So like through this relationship, I came to the point where I'm like, so you guys, I see you drinking energy drinks. So what's wrong with coffee? And so so then they started explaining to me, and then they knew it was really like because a Mormon gets the question all the time, why don't you drink coffee? So like I had the relationship, so they understood that my heart was like, I was just really curious, I'm not trying to, drop some logic bomb on them. Well, really, if you think about it, I think the relationship helped smooth that whole question over.
Yeah, I think that's really good. My answer to that is questions may offend, but willing ignorance is offensive. Does that make sense to you? Like your question, your one question right now may offend for a moment, but me staying in ignorance of someone is going to bring even more offense and constant offense. So I say be willing to ask a question, and if someone's offended, stand in their offense with them and have that heart was like, hey, I want you to know my heart. I want to learn. I want to understand you. So this is why I asked that question. Yeah. And from there, once your heart is open and truly they see, oh, this person wants to know, this person wants to learn, you won't have those offensive things anymore. Now, you will have to do that with the individuals, because not every individual is going to know. But I truly think that a question may offend for a moment, but being willingly ignorant will be offensive for a lot longer time.
Well, I was just going to say that more often than not, the initial offense is from a past experience of someone else offending them instead of your innocent question. Because, like what Reese was saying, if you don't have the foundation of the relationship, they don't have anything to base it off of other than past experiences. Sure. So that's why the relationship is very important. I still have yet to ask my very good friends that are Muslim, tell me about your religion, because I don't know how to bring that up, especially in the atmosphere that the world is in right now, without causing some sort of offense. And so I'm waiting. I probably shouldn't, but I'm waiting.
That's why I'm bringing this up. Because how do we have this discussion out in the world when we're with people? You guys, you know my heart. I've been doing this for a long time. But we have to somehow get past the offenses and the fear. And I don't, like, if I just come at somebody with a loving heart and open, is that enough to start these discussions and say, hey man, I love you, can we talk about this?
I think it is enough, but I wouldn't do them simultaneously. I would not ask those difficult, investigative type questions at the same moment that you're opening your heart and beginning to build relationship. I think it's relationship first. Like Reese said, I think you just simply let them know you love them and you want to be with them in whatever they're at, and same with you. I mean, I think that's the same way with you. If someone comes into your life and immediately starts peppering you with questions about why you wear a purple thing and why do you do this and all that kind of stuff, after a while you're kind of like, whoa, 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 how about we just get to know each other? And the person goes, well, I am getting to know. That's how I get to know you. But the SOS question that we ask, I still think is probably the most important question to remember, is what's going on inside of me. And until personal responsibility becomes something we all decide is what we owe one another, like I owe you to not automatically think you've got the worst intentions for me. At some point in time, we just all have to agree that unless Jen is purposely hurting me, you're in it for my good. Until you prove me wrong that I believe you're in it for my good, I'm going to agree that you have good intentions toward me. And so back to this person that might get offended because you're asking questions. At some point in time, they're just going to have to, at some way, shape, or form, have to trust you. And because of what Devin said, many people's trust is broken. A lot of past relationships have created a whole lot of distrust among differing races, religions, nationalities, whatever. So I think Reese makes the most important point. We just have to create relationship. Until they get to see Jen's heart, which we have now all gotten to see, and now we know she's wide open, she's loving, she's kind, she wants to learn and she wants to give. Why not would I receive any question from you? Like, I can't think of one question I would receive from you that I'd be offended about. And it's not because I'm really unoffendable. No, it's because I get your heart. I really see your heart. And here's one more thing I want to say. I think we have to decide that we can't offend people. I think we have to decide that. People get offended. There's a huge difference between those two things.
Yeah, you make a decision about how you're going to receive
Absolutely. Like, no one can intimidate you, but you can be intimidated. I think we need to decide that we're not making people feel anything. People are choosing to feel things. And so, do we have a responsibility in not, like intentionally going in there and lighting things on fire? Sure. That's loving. That's coming at each other in an understanding way. But at the end of the day, I cannot be constantly worried about if I'm offending you or not. I have to open my heart and give myself to you and just believe that if you're going to be offended, let's believe that love will cover that stuff.
Yeah, because if you're living in that, there's no trust in your relationship actually being strong. And I do think, I completely agree, relationship is the first thing. But if I have built relationship and I never ask a question to understand, then why?
And we're not growing the relationship.
Yeah, why did you build that relationship?
Yeah.
So I agree. There has to be that portion of, I think there has to be some legwork involved in the beginning. There needs to be some investment that we put in the beginning with people to lay the groundwork. I don't remember, I've heard this analogy plenty of times, but there is deposits that you have to make in someone before you decide, like, all right, I'm gonna ask a question right now, right? Here's a withdrawal. Like that, that's it. It sounds almost it's basic. Right? I need to be able to pour into someone, but I need to be able to ask a question once I've established that relationship because it grows it.
Yeah, so something I was, it was actually last Wednesday, I was driving home and I was praying about was like, I was just like Mark was saying, like, I was sitting here and I was being worried about, like, if I offended someone, did I offend so-and-so when I said this a little too bluntly? And I beat myself up about saying stuff like that. So, like, when I say something and then, like, I find myself, like, going back and apologizing to people, which is really more for my edification. I feel like sometimes just to be like, I really didn't mean to offend, like, and try to explain it better, sometimes in words or writing over Facebook. But what I was talking to the Lord about, I said, I want to be, I want to be truthful and open with people. And I want to be able to receive criticisms or, like, critiques on how I said something. Like, I want someone to be able to say, they come to me and say, Reese, you said that a little, like, the way you said that is just a little offensive to me. And I want to be able to receive that. I want to be able to take what someone said and be like, I don't want to be so arrogant to, say, well, I said it in love and it was an open heart and it was true. So, I said, but Lord, I don't want to be constantly beating up myself because I'm assuming that someone was offended. I said, so Lord, let you be the measure until I've heard otherwise. You be the one to tell me, hey, Reese, work on the way that you talk about these certain things with people because you might say it a little too harshly. So that was something that I was praying with the Lord about. And it was a very releasing feeling to say, like, until someone tells me or, sends me some kind of signal that they're offended, I'm going to wait until told otherwise. But it's definitely a relationship thing.
Yeah.
I would never, I'm sorry.
I think that's trust.
Yeah.
To believe that someone has a relationship with you or not, they're going to come talk to you. That's trust. So whoever you did that with, you offered them trust. That's a big deal.
One of the biggest things that you've ever told me is I don't even remember, you just did something that offended me. And I came to you and you're like, I'm sorry you're offended, but I love you enough to say that's on you. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And yeah, I processed that, and it's true. I mean, you didn't do anything. I took it the way I took it. And yeah, so that was offensive, but it's okay.
I'll tell you, I'm sorry. The people I have the two closest relationships with is that woman right there and that man right there. And I know that I have been able to go to both of them and say, I did not appreciate this. All right? The thing I would never say to them is, you made me feel. I don't think I've ever said that to either one of you. You made me feel this. Yeah. But I've been able to go to either one of them and say, this is how I feel about this thing. This is how I feel about this. And actually, they've led to some of the most healthy discussion. Like, you sit around with someone that you just agree with all the time, it's always agreement, it becomes very stagnant. Like, it becomes like, yeah, we agree, I agree. It's like, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, what don't we agree with? But, I mean, I want to list all the things that I've disagreed with my wife on that has grown me because I've learned that I was wrong. How to convince, yeah. But those are my closest relationships, my closest relationships are not the ones of the people I always agree with. The closest relationships I have are the ones that I have disagreed with and found common ground. And usually, you know what the common ground is? I have a heart for you and you have a heart for me. And that causes, like, growth and unity, like our love. Yeah, Chucky.
Yeah, probably at a combination of all those, but I do believe the relationship part's important. I don't think it's the only thing. And Mark, you talk about how spirit can precede you, and I think that's like the open heart. So if your heart's in the right position, it sort of comes to a point, if you offend the person, that might happen, or if they take your offense, I guess is the way to say it. But I think the third part is really to grow in discernment. I mean, I'm probably the master of question asking when I'm with people because I feel time's so valuable and limited, so I want to make sure I get to what we need to talk about. And I really think discernment's the key there, and so you can really start to feel in a person, I think, when you can ask those questions. So I don't think it's always, a lot of times that might take building the relationship and having an open heart, obviously. But I love what Ben said. If I'm constantly meeting with a guy and we're talking about football all the time, at some point I'm like,
Can I say something just real quick about that I forgot to mention? So these two gentlemen that I used to work with, I had the relationship with them and had these, just general conversation about Mormonism, right? Just out of my general curiosity. So that was sort of like, we talked about the long haul of process of relationship, which led to answers in my questions. But what that did was, so now in my current job, one of my manager is Mormon, and I found out through like someone else. But I knew, I looked at his keychain and I saw he had a little bottle on his keychain, which I had asked my previous friends at my old job what that was, and it's for anointing. And so I knew that he was Mormon, and so I'm like, whoa, this guy's my manager now. If I start, asking these kind of things, so I because I had this relationship, now I know a little more about Mormonism. I said, oh, these two guys I used to work with, they were Mormon, and they said X, Y, and Z about this and that. And like, it just completely changed the conversation, because now I'm not coming from a place of complete ignorance. I've come from a place of like, I've already, I've started to ask some questions about like your culture before, and from these people that I knew, it's, and it was kind of a conversation starter. And I think the discernment and the heart of it, if you're coming, I think their spirit's going to recognize if you're coming from a place that's not general curiosity most of the time. They're going to know if you're like looking for something specific that you can, nitpick about, or, have some debate with them. And I mean, I feel it. I feel it when someone asks me a question, and it closes you off pretty quick. So yeah, the real, like, are you legitimately curious? Is that something you can look up on Google? That's the kind of questions I ask myself. So yeah, maybe that might be some of the ignorance that I had of like, maybe I should do research before I start asking them stupid questions about there, But I just generally wanted to dive into the relationship with them.
I think, I don't know who said it, but I like the idea of softball questions too. And one of the biggest softball questions you could ask is just about their experience, or about them as a person, because everybody should be able to speak to me as a person, as an individual. Right? This is my perspective. This is where I come from. This is what I know. This is what I've experienced. I think those are insights to a person to be able to. That's building relationship. It's like, tell me about your family. Tell me about these things that you know so intimately, and I can't argue. If you are able to have a conversation on that type of level I can't argue your experience away. Especially when I'm building relationship, it's like arguing my.
What do you do on your weekends? What do you get into? What are some of your hobbies?
It could be that simple. It could be that simple, and I really think that great relationships start with the easiest of things, with the simplest thing, and not just jumping into the deep end of the pool, but building true relationship.
This is just on my heart. Like, it's kind of out of left field. Like, I just see us talking about relationships so much in the context of offense, and where I see offense come from in the world, within our culture, is from this big demand in recent years for political correctness. And like, I see where that comes from. I'm not going to go into that, but like, where I see that leaves us is people closing themselves off more. Is that me? I'm sorry. What'd I do? Okay. It's people like closing themselves off more and taking offense from other groups, and so then they just kind of like go behind their closed doors and come up with their lists of like, this is how we want to be addressed, how we want to be seen, how we want you to talk about us, and they post a list on their front door and slam the doors and build their walls higher. Sure. And so then when people don't really take the time to like read that and like find out about their culture and come in with questions, that's where they get offended, and then they sit in that. And I feel like what I see here in this room right now is people finding offense and getting past that through relationships. So what we need to decide in our culture of the Who family is to not sit back in our closed doors and talk about other people and talk about ourselves and all this, but just not have that and go knock on those doors. Yeah. The relationship.
I think what you described is exactly the definition of what Leslie talked about, is we get into these little silos, and we even define ourselves by these silos, and we never get out of them. Mm-hmm. We never reach out of them. Like, there's a small thing, but it's just an example. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a culture that when you walked into the door, it didn't matter who you were, okay? If you walked into somebody's house, you hugged them and you kissed them. Like, that was it. You hugged them and you kissed them. That's how it was. When we moved here, I was like, man, this is before we had revelation about it. But when I moved here, I was like, nobody hugs and kisses. I was like, I don't understand that. So I know going in, if I would have just went and hugged and kissed a female, it would have been really, really offensive to them. But to me, it's like, this is my cultural experience. Like, we hug and kiss. Like, I kissed my father through like a senior in high school. He would drop me at he didn't care if I was embarrassed, but he would take me to the front door of my high school, and I hug him and kiss him, and that was part of our cultural experience. He would not relent on that thing, but I would not give that up for the world. I would not give that up for the world, and it's the tiniest thing, but it's my cultural experience. So I almost was like, well, okay, how do I greet you? I don't know how to greet you. Hello. That felt very uncomfortable to me. Did you have something?
I did. Are you burning? I got this, but are you burning?
I might go a little different ways.
Okay, so I want to stay on this for a second. First of all, I loved what Sam said. I'm not sure if they caught it. But instead of asking them questions, we end up talking about them with people that we're comfortable with. Yeah. Did you guys hear that? Dang, I love that. And that is what keeps us in our silos. That's what keeps us in our like-minded groups. That instead of going and actually talking, even when we're like upset with somebody, we'll go to someone that'll agree with us and complain about that person. Instead of just going to that person that we're upset with, saying, can we work this out? Yeah. Amazing things could take place when that happens. By the way, if you're the master of asking questions, I'm the master of answering your questions.
That's true.
I love that. We should all pick up the microphone, and the first thing we should say is what we're the master of, because Chuck started that, and I love that.
You told me to ask Leslie today, though. Ask you a question.
Jen was onto something earlier when she said that what we're actually talking about isn't as important as the heart and perspective from which we're talking. You guys remember she was saying that? I think that's so critical. You said something about our spirit going into the room before we do, that we win or lose somebody before we ever open our mouth usually. What they experience about us before we ever say anything is, they won't actually say this is what they've experienced, but it's almost as if they've kind of already begun to respond to us from their spirit and from their heart based upon all of, and don't even call them nonverbals because that's not it. It's literally the spirit of our heart. So I think an important part of this discussion is to actually talk about where our hearts are in this. Not just have an ethereal intellectual discussion about diversity, but literally, like, what do I need to repent of here? What judgment am I bringing in that before I ever try to have a conversation with you, my heart's already rejecting you? Or my heart's already got a bias that you're feeling because the spirit of a thing is more important than the information of the thing itself. Yeah. So I think if we remember that as a people, if we remember that as individuals, that when I'm sitting with you, even though I'm looking like I am really interested, in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to get anything, and you will eventually begin to I'm not exactly sure why, but I don't feel like I need to say anything more about this because you don't even know it's because I think it's ridiculous. Yeah. You might not be able to put two and two together to think
That's so good. What decisions have we made before the options have been laid out on the table? About people. Like, I have made certain decisions about you even before you have revealed who you are. And I think that's so good. Like, what biases have I walked? I think for myself, I need to go examine, I think we all do, need to examine our hearts and say, what are my biases around, and you just fill in the blank. A certain race, gender, sexual orientation, that's probably a hard one for Christians to swallow. All these different categories of people that I have made decisions about already, biases, set in stone, this is what I believe, and it stops me from engaging that person.
Okay, the master questions sometimes ask, not the best questions maybe. I'm not sure how this one will go. So I met...
I'm glad Mark is the master at answering your question.
Turn this way.
This is... Yeah, I want to come back to diversity in the kingdom. So I had really met some really good Orthodox, a guy, an Orthodox Jew in Richmond before I left. And their culture, you do not touch the woman at all when you greet. Now, his wife would shake my hand because would do that, but in general, they don't want you to touch the women. Totally different than your culture.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah,
question.
Now, let's not going around touching women. Let's not.
Okay. Hug and kiss.
Not totally opposite.
The question is, if we could look forward 10, 100, 1,000 years, and obviously we're getting to a point where it would be nice to know each other's cultures, and you talked about this African, dancing with joy. Well, wow, if that's, we're asking questions because we want to learn, and we're probably going to take what we like from each other, right, and get to become friends and relationships. So over time, if we looked out into the diversity in the kingdom, is it preserving individual cultures, or is it all becoming meshed into one culture? What's the goal, if there's a goal?
All right, master of answers, let's go.
That's a really great question.
Can I give a throw at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the answer.
I think it's yes.
Oh.
I think it's both.
So,
I think it's me being willing to adopt yours to make some of what, not some of what, but at least who you are a part of me. And then still you from me freeing you to still be who you are. I think it's both. I think it's me adopting you into my life without making you become me.
That's good.
It almost goes back to what Jennifer was asking. Like, can I be a Christian and go into this place with this person? Yes, you can. In fact, you probably should be there. You probably should be there opening your heart and learning. Yeah.
Did you say my Father's house will be a house of prayer for one nation?
No, it says for all nations.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the verses. We've been talking for so long, and I have like a list of verses. I can't tell you, like, when I was just getting into my Bible, how many times it says all nations, all tongues, all in just like 50 Bible verses that I didn't even get through all of them, where it says all nations, all tongues. There's a great one in Corinthians that says, I'm going to mess it up, but it basically says that all tongues are important, and all language is important, and all language has meaning. I do believe that every single culture shows us an aspect of who the Father is, and it should be in this one melting pot. Like, when you taste an amazing meal, you can taste the different flavors of, I taste the this, and I taste the that, and the hints of this, and they should all be there, and you should be able to experience them, but they all go into experiencing this ultimate Father that we have, this loving Father. So yeah, I don't think it's all or nothing, and I think for too long we've said, well, I'm going to have to give up my culture if I'm going to be in the kingdom, and the Lord's saying, no, that's not what I want you to do. I actually want you to bring your culture, and I want you to bring your personal experience, and I want it to point to Jesus, to who he is. He wouldn't have made you if that experience is not important or that perspective is not important. So when I think about diversity, it's not just skin color and ethnicity and race. It's about your experience too, and your perspective and your understanding. And that doesn't mean I have to say everything that Jen says is right. No, but I can't say that I have a full perspective of the Father unless I'm listening. I'm listening and having an understanding of where you come from, what you're saying. Does that make sense? I want to, yeah, Danny.
There's so much that I want to say that I don't want to get lost, but in speaking of diversity, I love how easily we were able to turn it into relationship and the person, because if we speak of diversity and we talk about race and we talk about cultures and how to approach them and all this, we're missing the point if we're not seeing people. And even with what you were saying of our culture and our background and stuff, we see Paul in Acts all the time referencing, like, I was a Pharisee, like, this is how I grew up, this is, like, using that and bringing that to tell people, especially the Jews, which he would talk to all the time and be like, I want, let's get to the same ground, like, let's level the ground, let's just talk as people, this is what I want you to understand. Or this is what I want to share with you. This is the love that I want to share with you. And with what Randall Worley had said, like, never see it as us and them. Like, it's all of us together. Like, we as, like, humanity, we're all made out of the same substance. We're all in this. And in diversity, I think the most important thing is having this open heart, that it doesn't matter who we meet, no matter what their age is, what they look like, or where they come from, that we come with an open heart, that this person is going to bring value into my life. Like, this person has value. This relationship, this encounter, this person that I just sat down and by, and it's the first time we did, or it's the third time, it's whatever. Like, there is value in this encounter. There's value in this relationship. And when we have that, then we overlook their religion. We overlook if they want us to come to the temple or whatever. We'll go into what is the value that this person has that it's going to bring to me. And I know the love. I know what I have to give. I know that I have Jesus to give to them, but also the willingness to be like, this person is going to bring to me. Because for me, I don't know, it's easy because we had always, like, missionary teams and always people from different countries, and it just became something that once you do it and you learn how much value you can receive from someone that you've never interacted with, and especially if you hear that they're from a country that you've never been to, you're just excited to do it after that. You just want to do it more and more and more and more. And I think one of the best examples would be when Annika was here and she was from Germany. And I was, like, so excited and I was so happy. I was like, I've never talked to someone from Germany. Tell me everything. Like, tell me everything about you.
I think that's so good because when Jen and I went to Italy, it opened this desire to go to other places and experience other places. But we have that ability when we interact with someone, like, oh, this person, like with Annika, we sat at our table and tell us about your culture, tell us about, and when you interact with people, it just gives you taste for more flavors and more understanding of who they are. Like, we could actually give you the 10 points of how to interact with a so-and-so, but it will never be able to give you any points on how to interact with Jen. Like, you have to interact with Jen in order to interact with Jen. I can't give you 10 points of, well, there's this and there's this and there's. I'm giving you a bias then. You need to be able to go and interact with that person that's outside of those cultural boundaries and silos that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. I want to make this official. I have like 6 minutes, but I want to read a story from the Bible. But do you have something? Go ahead.
Just going to add a point to that. So a lot of you guys know about me and Jocelyn, the fact that we like going on missions and all that kind of stuff. Well, Jocelyn was raised with that. She was raised in missions. And when we first started having kids, she was like, how can I experience this? You know, like we have young kids now. It's kind of hard to take a baby on a plane and take them to a third world country and, you know, and do the mission thing. So we were thinking of ways that we could do that, and that's when we had Teresa come from the Czech Republic. Like, we hosted an exchange student, and that, like, bringing that culture into your house for 6 months is just, I mean, it'll change you. It is amazing, because not only do we now have a relationship with her, and we still talk to her regularly on, like, you know, Facebook Messenger and all that kind of stuff, but it was so fun to learn about the Czech culture and to have her experience American things that she had never even known about. You know, it's really eye-opening.
So I probably am starting this point too late, but I want to go through this portion. If you go to Genesis 11, does everybody knows the story of the Tower of Babel? Like, everybody knows it? Does everybody know it? We're going to go through it quickly, but I want to just point some things out. Like, when I first was taught this story about the Tower of Babel, I think you could probably decide these people are getting together, they're creating this tower, God is angry. That's how I kind of was taught. God was angry that they were building this tower, and he introduced these languages in order to stop them from building this tower. Is that kind of how you were taught it too? Like God was angry? Okay, I want to read this. So I'm going to read it's 9 verses long. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they used brick for stone and they used tar for mortar. They said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven, and let us make for ourselves a name. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad over the face of the earth." Now, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. That's kind of a cool thing. The Lord came down and was like, I want to see what you're up to, okay? And it's amazing they're building the city and the Lord's walking around. That's really cool idea. The Lord said, "Behold," now this is where it really gets interesting. The Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language, and this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language. I was reading this from this context of diversity and understanding a loving father, okay? And I was always taught, probably how you were taught, that God was angry and he came down because he needed to stop this thing, okay? Now, my experience of the Bible, and especially of the Old Testament, is that the Bible isn't really shy about telling us when the Lord's pretty ticked off. Is that your experience too? It usually tells us, and the Lord was pretty angry at this point. It's not shy about telling us. And for some reason, it doesn't tell us that he was angry. It actually almost points to he was curious about what these people were doing. But now I need to take it from the perspective of a loving father, okay? Because we need to take everything from this perspective of a loving father. So he comes down and he decides that with these men, he needs to reveal something in their heart that is not yet revealed. So he brings a little confusion. And I think all of us view the Father as the Father is orderly and he never brings confusion. And I think that the Father doesn't bring confusion until he does. There's times where he's like, all right, you need a push, so here's a little confusion. Because what happens in confusion is your mind is, you're thinking. You're thinking. And I think the Father wants us to think. So here he is, he brings about some confusion, and it's in the form of language, which we would consider a point of diversity. Now, at this point, the Father made an interesting observation about man. He said, basically, they're unified, and because they are unified, what? Nothing is impossible for them. Now, I don't know if he was making a judgment about their ability to do the impossible, but I think as a loving father, he needed to reveal something in their heart that one shred of difference between this did what? Spread them. So all of a sudden, this language thing came out, and they couldn't understand what they were talking, and there's some confusion, and what didn't happen? They didn't build the tower because they had this divide between them. So here the Father is, in a very loving way, reveals something in our heart. And what do we have today? We have division still today, this thing that's revealed in our heart that, oh, you have this one little thing and you can't get together because of this? What could you do? Could the impossible be accomplished if you were able to get over this little gap here that you have? I don't think the Lord, I mean, in my interpretation, here's Ben's interpretation. I don't think that the Lord was coming down and was so angry and said, stop. Like, we've seen him angry, all right, in the Bible. I mean, this is right after what? It's right after Noah. These are the descendants of Noah, okay? He flooded the earth, and he promised that he wouldn't flood the earth again, but I think he has a couple other tricks up his sleeve. He could have destroyed it a different way if he promised, but he didn't. He came down and he saw something about men. They can do the impossible, but there's something I want you to know about your heart. And here I'm going to reveal it to you by creating a little bit of diversity among you, and it drove people out. And I still think that it's beautiful. I still think the Chuck's point, like that is bringing about beauty and a full understanding of who the Father is. But could you imagine what we can do and what we could accomplish if those things, those divisions, were not in our way? If we could actually be unified in what Malachi says, we have one Father, one God who created us. That's the Bible. The Bible said you have one God, one Father who created you. So I want to end in this verse because I think the heart is really the most important factor. I know we're a little bit over time, but here we go. Here we go anyway. It's in Romans 14. I'm going to read this to you again. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. We have focused way too long on the eats or the abstains, and this portion of the verse we haven't focused on. For God has welcomed him. For God has welcomed him. That portion of the verse jumped up and punched me in the face today when I was just studying. For God, who am I to cast out the one that God has welcomed? And we do that with our hearts and our biases and decisions that we've made about people. God is welcoming people into his very self. Am I the one, the person at the door who turns them away? We look at these differences, eating, mindset, all this other stuff, and we use them as ways to disqualify people. And here it is, God says, for I have welcomed you. This is the repenting that we need to do in our heart. This is true diversity, that we could stand there and say, God has welcomed you. Come here and experience the Father, and let the experience of the Father be the thing that turns people's hearts. We're trying to cast out sin from people, and what we really need to do is introduce them to a loving Father. A loving Father who let's just say a loving Father. So that's my view of a diverse church, a diverse body. The kingdom would be us understanding that you have, like Danny said, that you have value. That you have value and you bring value into this experience. And sometimes that value is going to be in disagreement. Different perspective, different understanding. So that's my heart. That's my heart. I don't know how to end this. I don't think it's a discussion that ends here. I think it's something that we continually have to, I think we need to go look in the mirror and ask ourselves this. Do I truly value the people that walk in the door, their experience, their understanding, you fill in the blank. I love you. This is so heavy that we can't.